Hello and a very warm welcome to Future Fit Farming, a business videocast brought to you by the Royal Bank of Scotland. My name is Dougie Vipond. I'll be your host in this videocast, and I'll be discussing what the future looks like for agriculture and Scotland and how farmers can stay future fit. Join me today are three of Scotland's leading farmers. I'm delighted to introduce Joyce Campbell, Robert Neill and Martin Kennedy. Robert, Joyce and Martin, a very warm welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Dougie.
Now, Robert is a tenant farmer at Upper Nisbet Farm, a mixed farm in the Scottish borders. Joyce Campbell is the owner of Armadale Farm, a 5,500 acre hill farm on the north coast of Sutherland, and Martin Kennedy is a tenant farmer in Aberfeldy, and he farms with his wife Jane and three daughters. Now, last year, Joyce and Martin were appointed as co-chairs to the Scottish Government Hills, Uplands and Crofts Group. A remit of the group was primarily to consider practical measures to help the hill, upland and crofting sectors reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The initial findings were published late March 2021. Now, as part of that report, the group laid out their view on the future of agriculture in the hills and uplands. So Joyce, I'm coming to you first of all. It's quite a very serious report. So can you give us some of the headlines, the findings from that report?
It was a massive task to look at such a wide variation of land and different issues right across the country. But the main important take-home messages, I think, for the industry would be, simple wins are efficiencies. So your carbon audits, actually looking at what you're doing just now, looking at your health plans, making the quick wins, which makes us actually more profitable as an industry. But we're actually reducing our emissions at the same time. And another real issue was like a biodiversity loss and how we can change how we farm but still produce food. So that would be, for me, is it's not either or, it's doing both. And that would be the take-home message, that we all have corners of farm that we can plant up with some trees and we can make it a better place to farm. But the main thing would be that we need to be actively farming and we need to be producing food, but we need to be doing our bit, step up and do our bit for the environment as well.
Absolutely. And Robert, you run a different operation from Martin and Joyce down in the south of Scotland. So how do you view the future challenges and opportunities maybe for facing farmers like you in this sector?
Thanks, Dougie. There's going to be lots of challenges, and I think personally there'll be lots of good opportunities for farming going forward. But my biggest concern at the moment is climate pressure on reducing carbon emissions that Joyce has just touched on, global warming, the effect on crop and livestock production, whether it's warmer winters, wetter summers, those challenges are massive. We see flooding in the middle of the summer, washing crops out. So obviously production there is being really affected. We've got a growing population to feed, but the area of farmland is decreasing through natural erosion at the moment, and industrial buildings, roads, all these types of things are coming into it. So as Joyce did say, we need to produce an awful lot more from less, and efficiency is the key. Now in Scotland, we are producing, in my opinion, a really high valued, we've got a great story to tell. And as farmers, we should be shouting from the hilltops of what we do in Scotland. Scotland doesn't look how it does today without farmers, and it is there for the public to enjoy. And the great outdoors. Dougie, you enjoy getting out on your bike and walking, and your programs that you do on telly as a great advocate of Scotland and the hills. Scotland would not look like it does today, in my opinion, without farmers on the ground who are doing what they do at present.
So the challenges are definitely there, but I mean those opportunities, though. What do you think they are more specifically?
The opportunities, technology. We are going to have to be more efficient at what we do. We're going to have to look at inputs, but technology and data is key, as Joyce quite rightly said. There is going to be lots of opportunities, but we need to use every tool in the toolbox to help us reduce our carbon emissions.
Yeah. Now, Martin, the report laid out some key messages on how the government could support the sector. So what did you find specifically in this report?
Well, I think what the report's highlighted, as Joyce has already hinted at, it's not about looking at things in individual silos. I think, we've got to look at food production is what farmers and crofters do in Scotland. And as Robert said, we do it extremely well and already in a sustainable manner. But we need to look at all three. Biodiversity is key. Climate change targets are serious targets we've got to try and meet. But food production is what we do. So it's taking a holistic approach to all three of these things. And if we can get that balance right, which to a large degree we're already doing in Scotland, which is something, as Robert says, we should be proud of, but taking a sort of holistic approach to all three of these is definitely the way forward. And the report's highlighted that what our main fundamental role is looking at activity-based future policy and addressing all three of these issues, because environmental issues, food production, biodiversity, they're not individuals. They're not mutually exclusive. If we can tie them all together, efficiencies does apply to environmental benefit and climate change benefits, as well as efficiencies of individual farms.
And I'll just ask you all, I'm just keen to kind of know how you think, the industry is at the moment in terms of dealing with, climate change and greenhouse gas emissions and all that. Martin, I'll come to you first of all. You put the survey together along with Joyce there. Were you surprised by some of the responses and results you got, or were you pretty much expecting it as it was going to be?
Well, we knew because of the targets that are set that we've got some serious challenges ahead, and we accept that. But I think we've got to turn these challenges into opportunities, as Robert's already said. And I think we've got a fantastic opportunity here. But to be honest, my glass is half full in this. And I think from a sustainable farming production system in Scotland, we're ahead of the game, but we don't shout enough. Again, what Robert said, we don't shout enough from the rooftops of where we are. Some of the challenges we do have is likes of methane issues that, the beef cattle in particular, sheep are the same. Methane issues seems to be the bad guys out there. But the challenge is the way these calculations are done at the present time uses a calculation model called GWP 100, Global Warming Potential 100. And that was designed back in the 90s and implemented by the Paris Agreement in 2006. And it's way outdated now. We should be looking, Oxford University developed a different calculation called GWP star, which recognises the short-term impacts of methane. So all these things that as science is evolving, we see that science becoming more in favour of Scottish agriculture. And these are the kind of opportunities we need to grasp, because beef cattle, Scotch beef, Scotch lamb, a lot of the products, Scotch whisky, malt and barley, fantastic product. It's one of our biggest incomes in Scotland. But we don't shout enough about it, but we can do it in a sustainable manner.
In the previous videocast, we had Dave Ray. He mentioned that agriculture has to play, a massive role in improving environment through reduced emissions, carbon sequestration, and improved biodiversity. So, Joyce, it's a balance. You said that at the top. It is going to be a balance. So how do you think these outcomes should be measured?
Measure it. It's like how do we get the farmers on the journey is what my main take-home message from the work that we did. And so, there's methane inhibitors, and there's great research coming out of New Zealand just now, which will be, and actually breeding of specific lines of animals that are less emitting of the the gases that are causing the problem. But we've got regenerative farming that it's a different journey that people are looking at, and making the most of the land that we have and farming it in a more sympathetic way. From the 10 weeks that we met, we've had lots of presentations, and I have looked at my own farm with a completely set of different new glasses, and I am looking at fencing off natural birch wood, which is a huge asset for taking carbon, sequestrating carbon into the land, and it's actually better than planting trees. So going to plant off quite a massive area of that, and use it on the winter to winter cattle in, so it still need to be grazed, but not in the summer. Peatland restoration, huge opportunities going forward there. Carbon trading will be another one that will, it's how we farm. We'll still produce food, but we'll be farming a different way as well. And wildlife corridors, Martin came up with an absolutely mint idea, and it was to join up farms right across the country with wildlife corridors, because then wildlife can move along, and it's making it a nicer place for people to come and visit. And currently we've just coming out of lockdown again, and we want to invite people into our beautiful countryside, and we want to make it even better and even more inviting and a better place to come. So I think it's balancing your food production and how you grow your land, how you're growing your crops, but also how you're taking a holistic approach to what we do.
Robert, how would you like to see the government support this change, if at all, to help support food production in particular?
Yeah, Dougie, the government support is a key question at the moment as we head into the political agenda. But some people say that farmers are subsidised, but I turn that around and I say that we're not subsidised. It's a food security payment, in my opinion, and it's to keep food on the table for the general public. And we're producing high quality food a lot of the time at below the cost of production. We're not getting full reward for what we produce until such time that we do get rewarded in a proper manner and a proper price. The government are going to have to, keep these food security payments coming in some format. Now, Scotland is a different place to the rest of Europe or the rest of the UK. Our terrain is so different, so going to Joyce in Armadale with her sheep on the hills, she's getting a ewe lamb payment at the moment. We've got a payment for Scottish beef calves. We've just had a payment on capital grant scheme, for investing in capital items. So we need to look at all these different sectors within Scotland and keep money flowing through the system. And there's nobody better than farmers. When they do receive money, they spend it, which keeps the local community going, whether it's shed builders, joiners, electricians, plumbers, so it goes around, so farmers are great at doing that and keeping the local community going and the local community vibrant, in my opinion.
Now, I think you've all said it's important that we're shouting from the rooftops about how, good the quality of the food is produced in Scotland by the farmers and supporting brand Scotland. Joyce, you're obviously big on your social media. You've been on the telly a lot in This Farming Life. You do a lot for women's farming as well. But how can farmers, organisations and potentially the government help maintain and build upon Scotland's reputation, which is pretty good around the world for quality food production?
We need to get really proud. We need to be like how we felt on Saturday night when Scotland won the rugby the whole time. And just like get in there and just and come back with the facts and the research. So in up on my hill just now, we have lots of curlews just back from the winter, lapwings, golden plover. And not to take it down to a fine point, they're eating cow poo that was on deferred grazing that cattle grazed all last autumn and the early part of the winter, because we're creating habitats. And it's to tell the whole story. Yep, you're eating Scotch beef, but it's been reared in a special way. It's probably got world-leading welfare standards compared to other meats, but really come and say, this is what we do, and this is why we do it in this way, and this is what we produce, and become great storytellers, because we're great echo chambers into each other as farmers, but we need to take it to simple terms and speak to, as if we were speaking to a young child, and say in simple terms, this is what we do. We produce red meat from land that couldn't produce vegetables or crops, but we grow great grass and we grow heather, and we can do all of it. But we need to be really proud about what we do. And I think sometimes we're too defensive and too much on the attack, and that's not a good way. Look at yourself and think, what are you projecting to the public?
Well, you're pretty good at getting that message across, Joyce, but how can the industry be better then? How do you reckon? Because you manage that very well.
I think we need to look in the mirror and say, if I was listening to myself on the TV, or if I was listening to myself speaking to somebody out in the local shop, I mean, we're key players in our communities. We're really fragile, rural, remote communities that we live and farm in. And I bet you that Martin and Robert do countless other things as well as farming, the same as I'm chair of my whole committee, grazing committees, community councils. You will be, the farmers and crofters will be the first people there to do the community part. And I think It's to actually say, when you're dealing with people within your community, maybe that new people have moved into your community, we produce Scotch lamb and Scotch beef. If you can look out for that labels in the supermarkets, it's really helpful.
Robert, I'm going to ask you the same question to Joyce about, you mentioned right at the top, you're shouting from the hilltops. How can the industry be better at that then?
I think social media has got a fantastic tool to get that message across. But the downside is most farmers are shy people. And as Joyce said, if you look in the mirror, some farmers would probably get a shock, at what they see. So, social media is a dangerous place. And I don't need to say this, Joyce has come up against that. But, in the last 12 months, it's just brought it home to me. Joyce mentioned supermarkets there, but the local high street, the butcher shops, the grocers on the high street are buzzing at the moment. They seem to have had a fortune, a great fortune of people coming back to them and using the local butchers, and in turn the local butchers are flying at the moment. They can't get enough of our Scotch beef and our Scotch lamb at present to sell to the housewife, and that's fantastic, and I hope that continues, and they're doing a great job at promoting local farmers. I love going into the butcher shop and seeing my name on the blackboard, and that happens all over Scotland, and the butchers are proud people to say that we've sourced this animal or beef or lamb or poultry, whatever, just along the road, and they can tell the story for us on our behalf, and we can help them with that. So there is fantastic organisations out there. We've got Quality Meat Scotland, to help. We've got the Royal Highland Education Trust to educate the school children. There's schemes on the go at the moment. FaceTime a farmer, so you get the whole classroom onto the farm for 10 minutes, 15 minutes in a week or every 10 days. And the children love it. And the questions that you get from that are just mind-blowing sometimes.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, the progeny thing is hugely important, isn't it? And yeah, as you say, going to your local butcher, knowing exactly where your meat's coming from, and you can drive past it and you've seen it being produced. It's a great thing. And it is a fantastic thing also, Robert. I agree with you 100% that the Scottish public seem to be getting behind during the lockdown, and let's hope post-lockdown that they carry on eating locally produced and sustainably produced meat and vegetables and all the rest of it. Now, staying with you, Robert, you have been proactive in sort of preparing for your business for the future. I mean, you back in 2013, as a Nuffield scholar, you explored the benefits of electronic identification. How do you think then Scottish farmers can go about making their business and making their life more future fit?
Yeah, I did a Nuffield scholarship and spent 13 weeks out of the country and travelled the world to 6 different countries. And that was mind-blowing for me to see the advances in livestock technology that other countries were using and we weren't at that point. But I think we've come a long way in the last 7-8 years. And it's just simple things like using weigh bars on your cattle crush to weigh your animals and look at your feed efficiency. Is the nutrition that you're feeding these animals doing the job that it says on the tin? Is the nutritionist who's giving you advice giving you the correct advice and not just trying to sell you something to line his own pocket? So these are things that we need to do. I was brought up in a dairy farm, and every morning or every afternoon in the milking parlour, you could see how much milk that cow was producing by looking in the milk jar. But in a beef farm, you can't monitor that by just looking. You need to measure to be able to do that. So there's lots of tools in the toolbox to allow us farmers to be more efficient, whether it's weigh bars, electronic identification is a means of capturing data, but we need joined up organizations. There's no point in collecting and collating data if you're not going to use it. And there's no, in my opinion, at the moment, there's far too many companies trying to sell you down their road or do their thing, but they're not joined up with other organizations, and we're needing a flow of data from the farm here, right to the slaughterhouse, right to the supermarket, or right to the butcher's market on the history of that animal from conception to plate. And that's whether it's malting barley, from when it's sown, grown, how it's treated, till it's in the whiskey bottle going to America or Japan from Scotland. We need to have a full traceability, and we need to use every tool in the toolbox, in my opinion, to allow farmers to do this job properly.
Robert, you're a tenant farmer, so are the challenges slightly different for you to make sure that your business is more carbon efficient?
Yeah, Dougie, I'm a tenant farmer here on Lothian Estates, and Lord Lothian is my landlord. So I haven't got the luxury of fencing off areas of farmland and planting trees just how I would like to do that. The state are in control of woodlands over my area that I farm. So that is a massive challenge for me as a tenant. And I wouldn't like to see the rug pulled from beneath us because I'm a tenant farmer. I get it. I want to put corridors in for wildlife. I would love to plant corners, but it's just not as easy as a tenant, as a landowner.
Joyce, I guess it's important to get that balance right with regard to the tenant farmers.
Yes, indeed. Part of the Hill, Upland and Crofton Group final report, and we spent a lot of time, and it was quite a hard discussion to hear, actually, was that actually tenanted sector could lose out if they were going to get land taken out of production for tree planting, for peatland restoration. So it needs to be a combined approach in which that the tenant as well as the landowner has benefit, because the tenant actually has to manage that ground. It's fine for me to go and do peatland restoration out here in the Hill in Armadale, but if I have my neighbour deer comes in and wallows all over that peatland restoration work, it's a complete waste of time. So there needs to be really joined up thinking by the Scottish Government here on how we go ahead with carbon trading, carbon sequestration, and how the tenanting sector is looked after. And I'm sure Martin could come in with more detail on that.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really concerned about, and I'm optimistic about everything. My glass is always half full, but I nearly said full there, and it usually is. But in terms of concerns, carbon trading is something. It's going to be the new buzzword. Maybe the sort of, some people talk about the sort of new oil industry in Scotland. That's a real worry, especially for the tenanted sector. And we need to be awful concerned that we don't see a lot of trees getting planted in what is good tenanted land for sale as a carbon credit. And I think we need to be mindful that instead of selling these carbon credits as a one-off, we could actually sell these carbon credits on our product every single year. I mean, for us, because what could happen, as Robert said, we could get the rug pulled from under our feet here and we lose these credits. The fact that we have maybe big multinationals or possibly even airlines, they maybe buy, 8,000-10,000 hectares of trees for carbon credits. That doesn't make their planes any greener. All that does is takes the credit away from what our production systems are. And that's a real worry for the tenanted sector. So my view is, I would agree that there's a possibility of selling some, but within the industry. From my perspective, I'd rather see some of the intensive sector, see some of the credits we possibly have in our whole unit here. Because when we look at the poultry sector and the pig sector, which is both intensive sectors, who maybe sometimes challenge, or maybe more challenged when it comes to emissions, I'd rather see they got our credits, because I rely on that. The interdependency between all sectors in agriculture is absolutely massive. I actually rely, as a hill farmer, I actually rely on the pigs and poultry sector because of their demand for their grain. That demand for the grain produces a byproduct for straw, which I use as a bedding product for our continental cows and calves that are inside. That product then produces dung that we put onto the land that increases the organic matter in our soil, which helps the carbon sequestration capabilities of our soil. So it's a big cycle, but the interdependency between all sectors in agriculture is massive. So that carbon credits should be on the products we're selling, and we could sell them every year. And that's where the sustainability bit comes in. And then we probably get that share of what we've never had before, because farmers and primary producers in Scotland, all too often, the buck stops with us. Any cost implication, anything that comes, it comes back to the primary producer. We don't have the fortunate position of saying, we want this for our product. Every other item you purchase, there's a price tag on it. We're on the open market here, unless you're sometimes in a contract, but it tends to be an open market, and that's what the market's there to pay. So that's I see that as a real challenge.
Thank you very much. It is a very fine answer indeed. But before we wrap up, I want you to all suggest, if you would, one action you'd offer fellow farmers as they consider how to make sure their business is fit for the future. Martin.
Well, in terms of looking at efficiencies, I think we can all do a lot, and I think we can all look at what our own business is doing. And I think it's targeting our inputs better. So it's looking at efficiencies. It's targeting our inputs, whether it's been variable rate fertilizer applications, variable rate lime. It's been more efficient with the livestock production. Robert's talked about using electronic identification. It's about using natural breeding management, that we're using the best stock we have all the time. That happens. We've got fantastic stock people in Scotland from a livestock perspective. And again, using these efficiencies in technology, the arable sector are way ahead in comparison to what we're doing in some of the livestock areas. We're already using variable rate applications, GPS systems that's actually targeting inputs so that we're not wasting any inputs going onto the land, and actually keeping to a minimum the emissions that's coming out. So we do have these three things. Emissions reductions is that has to be a top priority. Environmental enhancement is a top priority, but let's not forget what we do first and foremost, and that's produce food. And I would like to see on a side, I'd like to see a bit more in education from that. We now spend around about 8 or 9% of our income on food. We used to spend about 40 odd percent, about 50 years ago, 40 odd percent. We now take food for granted far too much. We know it's going to be there. We'd like to see people eating seasonal and eating our own local produce. But in terms of what we can do, we will do our bit. We've got a fantastic opportunity to play that part. And as farmers and crofters in Scotland, I think we're in a great position to lead that in terms of climate change mitigation and environmental enhancement. But let's not forget, we produce food first and foremost.
Indeed you do. Robert, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, farming is in a good place, and it's all about engaging the next generation. You know, I've got two young sons who are mad keen on farming, and we need to engage the youngsters and keep them coming through. There's a bit of a lost generation in the middle there, but I think farming, dare I say it, is probably more sexy now. There's more youngsters wanting to come into agriculture, through social media, advertising, and it's a fantastic career. You know, there's no day the same. We need to look at knowledge transfer. Farmers, every day is a school day, in my opinion. You know, you always learn something, and the day you stop learning is the day you should give up, I would suggest. So yeah, fantastic opportunity. Let's keep on going. And as Martin quite rightly said, don't forget we're producing food. Okay,
Joyce, we'll finish up with you.
Okay, my take-home message is don't be afraid of the future. Embrace and be flexible. Be flexible in your approach of what you can do. You know, we maybe, as Robert hinted, there's kind of a lost generation which stagnated maybe slightly. I do feel there's a good buzz, there's a good energy, and there's a drive and passion there. People really care. There is some great advocates out there, and and we just all need to not be afraid, because I feel myself that we can make a real difference. We are the answer. We have the answers to some of the climate change problems, and we can do it if we can do food and production and environmental enhancement and reduce our carbon footprint.
Joyce, Martin, Robert, thanks very much indeed. And thanks to you for watching Future Fit Farming, our videocast by the Royal Bank of Scotland. If you'd like to see our first episode, you can go to our business hub and type in agriculture.